Hello everyone, my name is Abhishek and welcome back to my channel. Today is day 16 of Python for DevOps series, and in this video we will deep dive into beginner as well as intermediate level Python for DevOps interview questions. Initially, I planned this series for 15 episodes only, and that's what I mentioned in the day 0 as well, where I try to explain the core syllabus. I said this series will be of 15 episodes where we will try to learn Python right from fundamentals. We will cover all the Python for DevOps concepts, and we will conclude this particular playlist by doing 4 different projects. That was the initial plan. Later point of time, when I was looking at the core syllabus, I thought if I add 2 more episodes, which will cover Python for DevOps interview questions, beginner as well as advanced, it will be a best add for the playlist that I'm trying to do. And that's when I thought of adding this particular episodes, day 16 and day 17. So today, as part of day 16, we will cover beginner and intermediate. And tomorrow, as part of day 17, we will cover advanced Python for DevOps interview questions. So one request that I have is please try to watch day 16 and day 17, especially these episodes till the end, because we will cover interview questions, and this interview questions can help you validate your Python knowledge. And anytime if you have a DevOps interview where Python questions can be asked, use these episodes as a revision. So you can use this as a quick glance. And before going to interview, if you revise these questions, you can be more confident. Perfect. Now, without wasting any more time, let's get started. So the interview questions that I have today are mix of scenario based, theory as well as practical. The first question that I have for today is describe a real world example of how you used Python and what sort of DevOps challenge have you solved. This is a scenario based question. And I have a reason why I started this with a scenario based question, because these days people are asking, interviewers are asking scenario based questions. And even the people who try to reach out to me are very scared about scenario based interview questions. A lot of our subscribers say that, Abhishek, I'm not able to answer scenario based questions. So that's why I have bunch of scenario based questions today. So during the interview, if someone asks you a scenario based question, don't get panic. Try to understand what is their expectation. What are they expecting from the question? So if you look at this particular question, interviewer is just trying to understand if you have really worked with Python or not. So what you need to do if someone is asking you such question, try to convince them by giving an example. What kind of Python project did you work on and what challenge did you solve? So for that, I have bunch of examples for you. And all of these examples are from the playlist or from this particular GitHub repository, the course that we have done. For example, let me pick up one particular project and explain you. So either I can pick up the Boto 3 project that we have done or GitHub Jira integration. Let me pick up GitHub Jira integration. So if interviewer is asking me this question, I'll just say that, okay, so I was given a problem statement where we have our source code that is maintained in a GitHub repository, and we have Jira where we track all the work. So there is a requirement that is given to me from a development team that whenever a developer comes to a pull request on GitHub and comments /Jira on the GitHub issue, a Python script should be triggered, and that Python script should create a Jira ticket with all the information that is available on the pull request. Or this can be a GitHub issue as well. So now what did I do is I wrote a Python script. You have to explain the interviewer that I wrote a Python script, which is a Flask based Python application. And what it does is it will expose an API, and this API is shared with GitHub. So whenever a developer comments /Jira, GitHub webhook is triggered and it sends the payload to the Flask API. Now this Flask API will read the GitHub pull request and check if the comment is /Jira. And if the comment is /Jira, it will talk to the Jira APIs and it will create a ticket on the Jira. So this is one project that I have explained in the GitHub repository, I mean in the Python for DevOps playlist as well. And there are other projects. For example, you can also take Boto 3. If you're comfortable with AWS, then you can say that there is a requirement that is given to me by the developers where they have asked me to write some scripts using the serverless way. So I've written some Lambda functions on AWS and I've used Python there to solve the problem that they have given to me. You can talk about any of these things. And like I mentioned, the goal whenever you are talking about this particular answer to the question, you need to make sure you explain the problem statement clearly and you explain what is the outcome of the problem statement, like I've just explained here, right? So this is how you convince the interviewer that you have good knowledge on Python. And these use cases can be anything. You can pick up use cases from 4 use cases that we discussed in this particular Python for DevOps series, or anything that you know beyond this as well. Perfect. Now, question number 2. Discuss the challenges that you have faced while implementing the project. So this is a follow-up to the previous question. Now I've designed all of these questions in such a way that you will face these kind of questions in the interview. So I have kept the same questions, and this will help you if you practice these kind of questions. It will help you when you go to an interview. Okay, I'm already prepared for it. So the question number 2 is a follow-up to question number 1. When you explain this particular project, let's say, interviewer will immediately ask you, okay, tell me about a problem that you have faced while implementing it and how did you solve it. To answer this question, you need to definitely do the project. And this is the expectation from the interviewer also. So interviewer is just trying to understand, are you making up something? Are you trying to fake that you have actually worked on it, or did you actually work on it? So if someone is asking you such interview question, scenario based question, you will be able to explain them only if you do the project. For example, this particular project that I have explained, of course I'll not be able to complete this in the first time. I'll face a lot of challenges. I might face some challenges while writing the Flask application. Probably the application is not properly exposed, or talking to the Jira APIs, probably I did not figure out the right Jira API. One common issue while we are implementing this particular project was that we were not able to find out the issue ID, right? To put the issue ID, or the issue type, not the ID, the issue type ID, we were not able to figure out even when I was trying to do this real time on the episode. I couldn't find the issue type ID. So what did I do? I explored the documentation. I tried to go through a lot of sources, and finally I found the issue type ID. Or probably when I was writing this Flask application, maybe because I'm not coming from a development background, as a DevOps engineer, it was my first time to write the Flask application and I tried to do something. This is also something that you can explain. Or you can say, I'm not sure how to set up the webhooks and I tried to figure out, I read through some documentation and I created the webhook. These are some kind of things that you can explain. And to explain answer to the second question, you should have definitely done that particular project. So what I want to tell you is, whenever scenario-based questions are coming at you, the only way to be prepared for that is by doing the project, or is by doing the hands-on. If you are only preparing for theory and practical, you will easily get lost in the interviews. So what you can do is you can go back, do the projects that I have explained, or at least do one project instead of all the projects, and you can explain that project thoroughly to the interviewer. You can pick up any of the project as you want. Okay, let's go to the question number 3. Again, this is a scenario based question. How can you secure your Python code? So here, interviewer has not explained much. Interviewer is directly asking you how to secure the Python code that you are trying to write. There are so many options for this, and the simplest option is to say that any kind of sensitive data I'll not put in the code. Let's say I'm using Flask, or let's say I'm writing the application. I'll not put anything inside the code, but what I'll try to do is I'll try to use options such as command line arguments, or if there is a password or API token, I'll probably ask the developers or someone to put that as an environment variable and restrict the virtual machine only to people who should have access to the machine, because there is a password that is stored in the environment variables. Or command line option is the second way. Or in Python, as I explained you, there is another option called input variables. So to explain this in a simple way, I think better you explain about these three options. Question number 4. Explain the difference between mutable and immutable objects. I have explained this during the course syllabus, as part of list section, where we were talking about lists and tuples. So here interviewer is indirectly asking you the question. Here the question is not directly asked. Most of the people expect the question, what is the difference between lists and tuples? But here interviewer is asking you, what is the difference between mutable and immutable objects? So it's the same question, but interviewer just twisted it and asked you in a different way. So here again, you need to explain that, okay, in Python, there is mutable objects and there are immutable objects. For example, I can explain you lists. Lists are mutable, where you can modify the object once created. You can give one example where you can say you have list of numbers and probably you want to add one more number, or you have list of students and you want to add one more student. Then you have immutable objects such as tuples. And here what you will try to explain is tuples are immutable, where once you create a tuple, you cannot update the tuple. And again, you can give examples where, let's say, you have a hard restriction of a list of admin users, and you know this admin users will not change at all. So you can say, instead of list, you can add tuple and you can store the admin users inside the tuple. It can be probably founders names, right? Founders names cannot be changed. If there is a company and you want to store the name of the founders, so in tuple you will put both the founders name, and in future the founders names will never get changed. So you will store them in a tuple. If you store them in a list, there is a possibility that someone in the code might update it, and also the memory concept, memory allocation comes into the picture. So you can say tuples are immutable, once created cannot be changed, whereas lists are mutable, once created they have the flexibility to get changed. So next question is the other way of asking the previous question. Like I mentioned you, what is the difference between lists and tuples, or what is the difference between mutable and immutable objects in Python? Both the questions have the same answer, but interviewer is trying to ask you in a different way. Perfect. So I'm not talking about this question one more time. And answers to each and every question, like you see, are already available on this GitHub repository, so you can refer them. Then the next question, explain the use of virtual environment. This question can also be asked in different ways. For example, I'll ask you this question in a complete different way, where I might ask you saying that, okay, there is a scenario where I want to install two different versions of a Python package on the same machine. Let's say you have Ansible running on the machine, which have Python dependency of 2.7. I'm giving an example, or a particular module in Python with a particular version of Python. And then you have another package that is using a particular module of Python with different version. Where, let's take example here. Let's say you have a package in Python which is expecting Boto 3 of version 3.11.2. I'm just giving an example, okay? And then there is another package of Python that wants Boto 3, which is a Python dependency of version 3.8.5. Now, how will you solve this problem? If you install Boto 3 3.11.2, a particular Python program that you wrote will fail. And if you are installing Python Boto 3 3.8.5, another Python program that you wrote will fail. Now, this might be required from project team 1, where they are writing a Python program that requires Boto 3 of 3.11.2. And then you have team 2 that only require Boto 3 of version 3.8.5. If you install this version, this Python program will fail. If you install this version, this Python program will fail. This is a scenario-based question. And the direct question is explain the use of virtual environment. Answer to this is the same thing that I have explained. So if there are two different teams that expects you to have two different versions of same Python package or module, what you will do is you will use concept of virtual environment. So what virtual environment does is on a particular Linux machine. Okay, let's say you have an EC2 instance. So what it does is it will virtually split this EC2 instance into two parts. And you know, team one can create a virtual environment with name team one. Team two can create Python virtual environment with name team two. And here they can install all their packages, and here they can install all their different packages. How to use this virtual environment? All that they need to do is team one has to SSH into this EC2 instance and say source team1/bin/activate, and this particular team will say source team2/bin/activate. I've explained this in the series as well, so that is the reason why I'm not going these things in detail. If you want to understand, here I've given the commands as well as example. You can go through it, but try to understand the concept of virtual machines. Sorry, virtual environment. Next question: what are decorators in Python? All the concepts that I'm trying to explain are already covered in the course in the 15 episodes that we did. The reason why I'm trying to do it one more time, or I'm trying to cover them as part of interview questions, is because this will serve you as a reference or revision. What are decorators in Python? So this particular concept, like I have explained you, when I was trying to do the Jira project, I have explained you that decorator is a concept in Python that gets executed before the execution of the project. Now, whenever you explain this, interviewer will immediately ask you, okay, give me a real-time example. I'll give you a real-time example. Let's say that you are building microservice architecture, okay, where you are using Flask and you are writing an API. Let's say the API is definition, where the API says get user catalog, okay, and the output of this function will return all the items that you purchased. Let's take this as an example. Now, if there is a user who is not authenticated, that means, let's say this particular function you are writing for Amazon.com, and the requirement is whoever user who tries to call this particular API, okay, if someone says Amazon.com/get user catalog, they should not get the output. Only people who have already logged into Amazon.com or authenticated with Amazon.com should get the access. This happens on a day-to-day basis, right? Let's say you are trying to access Facebook.com/Abhishek.Veeramalla, right? You might see the profile, but to see the complete profile, LinkedIn or Facebook will say, please try to log in, right? If you want to see the full profile, you need to log in. How does this happen? This happens through the concept of decorators. That means before the invocation of this function, you are trying to validate if the person has logged in or not. So what you need to do, because this does not happen only for this particular function, right? There can be get user catalog, there can be set user catalog, there can be get payments. For each and every function, instead of writing the validating logic code, right? Validating if the user has logged in or not, instead of writing in each and every function, what you can do is you can use a decorator in front of all of these functions. That will help you to understand if the user has logged in, only then return the particular output. I'll give you an example here. I've already explained this during the projects as well, but let's say we have this program. Okay, so I'll get my terminal here. Now, if you take a look at this particular program, this is a program that I have just shown you. What I'm trying to do is I'm trying to call say hello. Now, let's say if this decorator was not there, right? Output would be just hello because I'm trying to print hello. But because this decorator is available, what happens is this particular function gets invoked first. If this was a login function, then it will ask user to log in first before getting the output called hello. So here this decorator will call this particular function, and now the output will be something is happening before the function is called. Then the function gets called because we are trying to invoke here. Let's try to see if that happens or not. Now if I just say python 3 test.py, see, it said something is happening before the function is called, and then it called the output called hello. So this is the advantage of decorators. So you should start with explaining decorators are used to invoke a particular action before the execution of the function. But as soon as you explain that, interviewer will immediately ask you, give me an example. For that, you need to explain the same thing that I've just explained. Let's say you want to validate if a user has a logged in session before invoking a particular API, you can use decorator concept. Then the next question, how does exceptional handling work in Python? So we saw the exceptional handling use cases. Let's say you already know that there is a kind of error that might occur in your program. And if you are okay with such kind of errors and you don't want to terminate the program, right? There are errors where you want to terminate the program, and there are errors where you just want to say, okay, if this error occurs, just print a message and say the user that, okay, the input that you have tried to give is wrong. Let's take an example. Let's say that you are trying to perform a division operation, right? So when you try to give 10 divided by 0, your program will panic, your program will error out. And if you are not using the try and except block, what happens is your Python program will fail completely. So if you are okay, if user is giving 0 and you don't want to completely exit the program, you can handle it using try and except, where you can say except 0 division error. And what this particular block will do, if user gives input as 0, the denominator as 0, instead of exiting the program or instead of terminating the program, it will just give this particular division by 0 is not allowed, and it will say, okay, do not terminate the program, but just give this output to the user so that user understands he should not give or she should not give 0 as input, right? So again, I'm trying to repeat all of these questions that I've discussed till now, we have covered in the project section. So if you are finding something difficult here, that is because you have not completed this playlist and you have not completed the projects. If you complete them, you will find all of these things as cakewalk, and you will just see this as a revision section. Next question is, what is the difference between append and extend of a list? This is again quite commonly asked interview question. The only difference between append and extend is, let's say you have a list. To the list, if you want to add one element, you will use append. And if you want to add one list to the other list, you will say extend. That's the only difference, right? Let's say here you have this list 1, 2, 3, and you just want to add one element called 4. So you will just say mylist.append, and this particular element gets added to the list. Whereas you have list called 1, 2, 3, and you have another list called 4, 5, and you want to add this particular list to the primary list that you have 1, 2, 3. So you can say mylist.extend followed by the list that you want to add. That's the only difference between append and extend. Then you have the next question. What is Lambda functions in Python? I've deliberately added this section because whenever I say Lambda functions, most of the times DevOps engineers confuse with the Lambda functions in AWS as well as Lambda functions in Python. In Python, Lambda functions are anonymous functions. What does that do? What is an anonymous function? Basically, it is very simple. Whenever you have set of lines, I've explained you that if you have a set of lines and you want to structure those set of lines, and this set of lines will be reused in particular section or in particular Python module, then you will write a function in Python, right? Let's say you are writing addition of two numbers. This addition can be used by some other team, or this addition can be used somewhere else in your program. So instead of just adding, you can probably create a function and you can write that function addition. Now, there are some cases where you want to write set of lines, but this set of lines are not used in any other place. Sorry, in such cases, you will use lambda functions. So lambda functions are anonymous functions where even there you have set of lines, like probably you are writing the complete calculator, which is kind of a program or which is kind of a complete function that you are writing. But in case of lambda functions, you know that this particular set of lines will never be reused. Then you will write an anonymous function instead of an actual function. That's the only difference. Now, if you are not understanding this point, please let me know in the comment section. I'll try to do a particular example. When we do the advanced section, I'll try to cover this. What are the different types of loops in Python? This is a very simple question, but here interviewer will just try to understand if you know the actual difference between a for loop and a while loop. In a nutshell, if I have to explain you, if you know, if I have to just give an example, if you know how many times the loop has to be executed, better go with the for loop. If you are not aware the number of times loop has to be executed, go with the while loop. That's the simple explanation. If you want detailed explanation, you can watch our loops video. That is day 9. This is another question that I have explained during the operators, but I am asking you one more time here. What is the difference between is equals to and is operator, right? So I've explained this during the operators class as well. And here I'm trying to explain one more time. Let's say you have a list called 1, 2, 3, and then you have another list B, which is called 1, 2, 3. So here you can perform two different actions. One action is equals to, which is equivalent operator. What is equals to? It is equivalent operator, which will just try to see if the values of both of the variables are same or not. Understand carefully. It will just try to see if the values of both of these are same or not. Because A is equals to 1, 2, 3, B is equals to 1, 2, 3, output of print A is equals to B will be true. Let me try to show that through a program. Okay, I'll just try to open the test.py one more time and I'll just remove this entire thing. So we'll try to copy this particular section. Okay, so here I said A is equals to 1, 2, 3, B is equals to 1, 2, 3, and here I said print A is equals to B, and I'll also try to print A is B. Let's see the output of it. Okay, Python 3 test.py. Answer to first one is true, but second one is false. And you need to understand this very carefully. Why is answer to the second one is false? Let me explain this carefully. So when we declared A is equals to 1, 2, 3, what happens internally is whenever you declare this variable with this particular value, Python will immediately allocate a memory for you. Let's say it has AX, some hexadecimal object that is created for you, or some memory allocation is done for you for this particular variable. Then you have B is equals to 1, 2, 3. The memory allocation for this particular variable will be different, right? Because this is another variable and tomorrow you might change this variable, right? If Python creates same memory for both the variables, memory is a point where this actual value is stored, right? So for each variable that you are creating, Python will create a different memory allocation. So that's why when you are trying to do A is equals to B, this particular equivalent operator will not verify if the memory address of both of them are same or not, right? This is an equivalent operator which will only verify if, okay, A is equals to 1, 2, 3. So if B is equals to 1, 2, 3 as well, output will be true. When you are performing this operator, A is B, right? This is not equivalent operator. This is equal operator. Okay. And equal operator we'll try to see if the memory allocation is same or not. Okay, if the memory allocation is different, then equal operator will fail. Now, how does the memory allocation be same? You can probably just say a is equals to 1 comma 2 comma 3 and b is equals to a. Then if you try to say a is b, right, in this case equal operator will give an output as true, right? You can practice this and see, you will understand the difference between a is b and a equals to b. Perfect. Now let's go to the next section. What is the use of pass keyword? So it's very simple. Let's say you are trying to write a function and you haven't decided what needs to be implemented in that particular function. So you can simply use pass keyword, where you will say as a DevOps engineer, okay, in future I'll write the logic. Right now I'm not sure what needs to be written here, or I'm just writing a pseudo code. So you can just say write the function name, and inside the logic just say pass, right? What is the difference between global and local variable? This I have explained in the variable scope as well. So if you are declaring a global variable, you can call it inside any function. But if you are using a local variable or defining the local variable, the scope of the local variable is only within the function. You can copy this code snippet and also this one and try to perform on your laptop. Then the final question that we have is a very important one. What is the difference between open and with open statement? So the difference might be very simple, but if you try to understand the difference in detail, you will realize how important is to use with open statement. In the Python programs that we are writing, for example, when we try to learn about file operations in day 12, I have used with open, right? I've used with open, but not the open. Of course, both of them will do the same operation. Like using open also, you can open a file, and using with open also, you can open a text file. The difference is that if you are just using a open keyword and trying to open a particular file, you have to close the file before you close the function. If you don't close it, this file will remain open. That means a process will be open on your Linux machine. What is file open related to process? Anything that you try to do on a Linux machine, if you try to open a file, right, that is also a process that is running. There is a file that is open, right? Then if you are using this particular syntax called with open, as soon as you complete your code, with open will automatically close the file, right? So this is a safer one to use. Whenever you are writing a Python function, there are chances that you might forget to close the file operation. So always go with the with open statement. What happens is, if this person is writing code using open keyword and forgets to write this particular thing, you might say that, Abhishek, what happens? Only one file will remain open. What if this program opens 10 files? This program open 100 files. Then your Linux machine will become slow, right? Number of files open is equals to number of processes that are open. And because of that, what happens is your Linux machine might get hanged. If it goes to 1,000, 10,000 files, then it will definitely get hanged, right? That's why you should always use with open. This is again a scenario based question. So these are the questions that I have for today. One request is, because these are Python related questions, some people might get confused because not all DevOps engineers are acquainted to Python. So I'll request you to not just watch this video, but in the GitHub repository, there are examples as well. So try to practice. If you have watched all the 15 episodes, I'm pretty sure you will easily answer 8 to 9 questions without any failure. But if you haven't, then either you need to practice this particular questions, or better thing is to watch all the episodes today itself. Thank you so much for watching this. See you all in the next video. Bye bye.